Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first body paragraph of writing an essay. The first body paragraph is the second paragraph of your essay. It's the paragraph you write directly after your introduction. Your introduction is done at this point, and that's a big deal because once you get started writing an essay, it kind of just flows out from you. It becomes a little bit easier once it is started. It's the waiting to get started where the anxiety builds and builds and builds. Get your introduction done and you'll realize that the rest of it isn't that hard. Also know you've done the hardest work for this research paper, and that's finding sources and reading through them and finding excellent quotes that you can use that'll support your thesis. Once you have those quotes and you've annotated them, which we've already done in our notes in our first read guides, once you've done that, it's really a question of plugging that information into your essay and being done with it. So have no fears, everything is going well. Now note that your introduction is done. In that introduction, you did not give any quotes. You did not give any real facts. You did not say, in this essay, I will tell you, or in this essay, you are going to learn. No, you did none of that. What you did is you talked about the general idea that your thesis in a more of a general way, in a big way. So in this case, in Unit 1's case, we're talking about the unit question is how fear makes people do dumb things or act negatively or just does negative things to them. So what we did in our introduction, or you did, is you talked about fear in a general way, that everybody feels fear, that it's been going on for centuries, that it's a big, strong emotion, that it's a good or a bad thing. And then what you do is you funnel it down, talk about fear for 3 or 4 sentences, how important it is, how you can't get away from it. And then at the end, you say, hey, one of the things that fear does is that it causes people to do dumb things or it really affects them negatively. Boom. And then you go right into your essay. So first body paragraph, you are going to use the best quote from your first source. In this case, for our Unit 1, I mean, this works for all units, but for Unit 1, our first source was The Pit and the Pendulum. So what we're going to do is use our best quote from The Pit and the Pendulum, which shows fear either causing the main character to act in a stupid or dumb way, or how fear negatively affects him. And there are tons of examples. So let's take a look at something I want to show you right now. I have a form, like I like to do for pretty much everything. And this form actually is going to show you in a step-by-step process how to get this paragraph done. So again, nothing to worry about. You can see on this form, there are 4 steps. Each step should be about 2 sentences, right? 1 or 2 or 3 sentences. So that means your paragraph is going to be about 7 or 8 sentences with a properly cited quote that you're going to explain how it's important to your thesis. And then you're going to be done with paragraph number 2, which is your first body paragraph. So let's take a look at this. I'll read through this with you, show you just how easy it is. And if you do it in this step-by-step process, it should be very simple. And the cool thing is you've done most of this already on your annotations for your first read guides. So since we've done this already, you're just going to be plugging in the information that you already have. In some cases, you might even be able to copy and paste straight from your first read guides. But let's take a look at this. So this is where you're going to use your best quote or quotes from the first major source we read this unit, which was The Pit and the Pendulum, to support your thesis. Remember, your Unit 1 essay is to describe how people act irrationally or do dumb things when they're afraid or how fear negatively affects them. Now is the time to give your best example of a character doing this from the first major source we read, in this case, The Pit and the Pendulum. Now, this doesn't change. If you're reading this or watching this video and it's Unit 3 essay, or you're in a completely different class, it doesn't change how we do our first body paragraph. Again, you are simply going to give the best quote from the first major source that you read, because for every essay that you're going to write, you're going to be going out and finding sources to help you to make your point stronger, right? So in this case, we use The Pit and the Pendulum, and there are tons of examples of fear causing the main character to act negatively or does negative things to him in the form of making him pass out or shake, all sorts of things. So we're going to use one right now. Now, the first thing you're going to do in your first body paragraph, number 1, is you're just going to explain the thesis again, that people act irrationally when they are scared or affected in negative ways when they're scared. Give 2 or 3 sentences about that. Just go back to the beginning. And you can just be very direct. The first sentence, people act incredibly negatively when they are afraid, or they do not. Let's rephrase that. Many negative things happen to people when they are afraid. There are tons of examples of this happening in real life and to myself, but another great place that you can find this is in literature. Good. So that's just the first one. Explain the thesis again. Good. Give me 2 sentences. Step 2, after you've talked about how fear negatively affects people again, just in a general way. Now, explain in step 2. Give me 1 or 2 sentences. A fantastic place to see this occurring is in the short story, The Pit and the Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe. You might say something like, this happens, there are several examples in this story of fear causing the main character negative reactions or affecting him in negative ways. Excellent. Then, now step 3, you're rolling right along. You are going to give your quotation, but you are going to give a quote starter first. And I give you a couple of examples. You can choose any one of these 3 or come up with your own. The easiest one is consider the following quote. So you've just spent 4 sentences talking about how fear negatively affects people, and that one of the greatest places to see this is in literature, and why not The Pit and the Pendulum since it's full of this. Then you're going to say, consider the following passage from The Pit and the Pendulum. And then you're going to insert that quote, right? You're going to make sure you cite it correctly. So after the quote, you'll put quotation marks, then a space. Then in the parentheses, you will put the page number or the title. And then after the parentheses, you will put the period, right? And then after that quote, so you said, consider the following quote, blah, 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 The Pit and the Pendulum. Then let's finish this quote by explaining how it proves your point. And you're also going to start that with a finishing sentence starter, something like, this is an excellent example of, or, and my favorite one, this quote clearly shows how fear negatively affected the character by showing how he blank. This is an excellent quote to show how fear really can affect people in a negative way because it did so much to our character. Explain in 2 or 3 sentences why you believe this is a great quote and how it shows that fear negatively affected this character. And then guess what? You are done with body paragraph number 1, which in this case would be your second paragraph after your introduction. So again, let's take a look at these 4 steps. 1, you're going to explain the thesis again in 1 or 2 sentences, or actually do it in 2 or 3 sentences, how fear negatively affects people or it makes them do dumb things, right? Just put it in different words. Just restate it in different words. 2, then you're going to explain how a great place to see this happen would be in literature. Hey, and why not The Pit and the Pendulum from Edgar Allan Poe, since it offers us so many examples of fear negatively affecting people. 3, then you're going to give us your quote, but you are going to start that quote with a quote starter. Consider the following quote, or this can clearly be seen in the following quote, or an excellent example of this being done by a character or being done to a character is when he or she says, and then you put in that. So that would be for a direct quote of the character speaking. When he or she says is a great example, or when it just happens to them as excellent quote is when this happens in the story. And then you give it, right? You properly cite it. And then 4th, you explain that quote. And you can always go back to the easiest explanation, which is this quote clearly shows how fear negatively affects the character by, and then you fill that information in 1 or 2 sentences, and then you are done with this paragraph. Excellent job, everybody. Thank you very much for your patience. I'm really proud of you. I think this is going to go well. Thank you very much. In a moment, or tomorrow, we'll do the second body paragraph, which you are going to see is almost exactly like the first body paragraph. You're going to continue to use the same format. You're going to describe it, you're going to introduce it, and then you're going to explain it. Have a nice day.